The laughter in the room sounded hollow, like cheap glass clinking before it cracks. Balloons floated above the banner that read, "Happy Retirement, Mom," in bold red letters. My coworkers had chipped in for the cake, my church friends brought flowers, and my daughter Melissa insisted on hosting the party at the community hall near Lakewood. I thought it was her way of saying thank you for the 37 years I spent teaching, for the nights I graded papers, until my hands cramped for every dollar I saved so she could go to college debt-free. But as I stood there in my blue dress clutching a paper plate of sheet cake, she leaned in close enough for me to smell her perfume, that expensive one I bought her last Christmas, and whispered, "Don't expect a penny from me." At first I thought I misheard. Maybe she was joking. Maybe it was her dry humor. But when I turned to look at her, Melissa's eyes were cold, the same eyes that once looked up at me from a hospital bed when she was 6, begging me not to die after my car accident. I blinked. What I whispered back. She smiled wider, for the crowd waved toward the camera someone was holding. "Smile, Mom." "You're on video," she said sweetly. People clapped. The music swelled. And just like that, the moment vanished, except it didn't. It stayed sharp as a splinter under my skin. I couldn't focus on the speeches that followed. My old principal thanked me for 40 years of service shaping young minds. My neighbor Hank joked that now I'd have time to join him at the diner for early bird specials. Everyone laughed, but my chest was tight, my ears buzzing. When the slideshow began, the one Melissa said she made herself, I finally turned my eyes toward the screen. Photos of my classroom of little kids holding handmade cards that said, "Thank you," Mrs. Caldwell flickered by. My husband Richard appeared smiling at our wedding in '84, then again older, holding Melissa in front of our old Ford. He'd been gone for 7 years now, a heart attack in his sleep. He left me the house, our savings, and the small pension from his years at the paper mill. Nothing grand, about $480,000 in total, plus the $1.2 million house we'd paid off together. Enough to live quietly, comfortably. Melissa's voice came through the microphone. "Mom has always been unique." The crowd chuckled politely. Unique, that word stung. Then she said, "But sometimes people hold on to things they shouldn't. Secrets, old-fashioned ways of thinking." The projector flickered. My stomach turned. The image on the screen changed, not another photo of me at school or with students, but a video. Grainy from an iPhone. My living room, my voice. If anything happens to me, Melissa will learn the truth. I'm tired of being silent. A gasp rippled through the room. I froze. I remembered that video one I'd recorded months ago, on a night when the loneliness pressed too hard, when I'd thought about sending it to my lawyer. I'd never told Melissa about it. The screen showed me opening a drawer, holding a brown envelope. This, my video self said, is what Richard never wanted her to see. People murmured. Melissa's hand shot up and the video abruptly stopped. "Oops," she laughed nervously. "Sorry, wrong file." But it was too late. Every eye in the room was on us. "Melissa," I said quietly, my voice trembling. "How did you get that?" She didn't answer. Her jaw was tight, her cheeks flushed. "Don't embarrass yourself, Mom. Let's just enjoy the night." I could barely breathe. My friends shifted uncomfortably. Hank cleared his throat. "Seems like an honest mistake someone offered." But I saw the truth in Melissa's face, not embarrassment. Fear. I put down my cake and walked toward the laptop that controlled the projector. My hands shook. "What's on that file, Melissa?" "Mom, stop," she hissed under her breath, smiling again for the guests. "You're overreacting." I looked around at the faces, people I'd worked beside for decades now, watching the spectacle like a soap opera. My heart pounded. "You invaded my privacy," I said, my voice breaking. "Privacy," she repeated, laughing softly. "Mom, you record yourself talking about me, about Dad. Maybe you shouldn't if you don't want people to know the truth." "What truth?" I demanded. Her tone shifted, icy, deliberate. "That you've been hiding money, that you have accounts I don't know about, that you've been pretending you're poor so people pity you." The room went dead silent. Someone whispered, "What's she talking about?" My face burned. "That's not true," I said, but my voice cracked. Melissa folded her arms. "Really?" "Because I saw the statements, Mom. I know about the second house in Cedar Falls. I know you still get checks from Dad's company. You're sitting on almost $2 million while I'm drowning in student loans. It felt like every eye was cutting into me. Melissa, I said softly, that house was your father's investment. It was for you, for your future. She leaned in close, whispering again so only I could hear. Don't expect a penny from me when you're in that nursing home. You think you're the victim. You're a liar. And then she smiled again, raised her glass and said loudly, to my mother may retirement bring her peace. Applause. Forced, awkward, uncertain. But in that noise, one voice broke through a little girl's voice. My granddaughter Ella stood beside her father, clutching her teddy bear. Grandma's not a liar, she said loudly. You're mean, Mommy. The room fell into stunned silence. For a moment, I saw something flicker in Melissa's eyes, shame maybe. Then she turned away. I stood there trembling, my heart hammering so hard I thought I'd collapse. But beneath the humiliation, something stirred, not just pain, but clarity. Because if Melissa had found that video, she hadn't yet found the others. And those I realized as I looked at her smiling for the crowd, those would destroy her lies. When the last guest left and the lights dimmed, I sat alone at one of the round tables staring at the half-eaten cake that still said, Congratulations, Margaret Caldwell, 40 years of excellence. Funny, excellence felt like a cruel joke now. My name is Margaret Caldwell, 68 years old, retired English teacher widow, and apparently, according to my only daughter, a liar sitting on hidden millions. If only she knew how little of that was true. The hall was quiet except for the soft hum of the soda machine. I traced my finger over a spot of frosting, thinking about everything that had led me here, the long, winding road of good intentions that somehow turned into a battlefield. I wasn't born with much. My father was a factory worker in Toledo, my mother, a diner waitress. They taught me that you keep your word, pay your bills, and never throw away people who love you. When I met Richard at 24, he was a newspaper typesetter who could fix anything with his hands, cars, clocks, hearts. We had nothing but each other, yet it felt like enough. For years, I worked double shifts teaching literature at Lincoln High. I'd come home to cold leftovers and a sleeping child still in her school uniform because I was grading essays late again. Melissa grew up watching me live modestly, making every penny count. I packed her lunch, paid for ballet lessons, and told her she could be anything. When Richard died, everything changed. The laughter left the house, and the walls felt too big for one person. Melissa came home for the funeral, stood beside me with her perfect manicure and husband, who spoke in business acronyms I didn't understand. She hugged me, whispered, "Don't worry, Mom, I'll take care of you." But months passed. Calls stopped. Visits turned into text messages. Then came the requests, money for her startup tuition, for Ella's private school, help with a down payment on their new house in Portland. I said yes to every single one. I didn't even flinch when she asked to borrow $80,000 for just a few months. That was 3 years ago. I told myself she was busy, that she'd repay me when things got better. But deep down, I knew I'd been replaced by her husband's family, by success, by comfort. I was a reminder of a life she'd outgrown. Still, I loved her more than my own comfort. I canceled a trip I'd saved for 20 years, a quiet cruise to Alaska, just to help her avoid foreclosure. When she called crying about credit cards, I sent her another $10,000. I never asked for anything back. Maybe that was my mistake. People like me, women of my generation, were taught to stay quiet, to endure, to believe that love meant sacrifice, even when it hurt. But silence grows heavy. That's why one lonely night last winter, I started recording myself talking to Richard, pretending he was still there. The first video was just me reminiscing how we'd met, how proud he'd be of Ella. Then the words started to slip out, things I'd never said aloud. How Melissa treated me like an obligation. How she rolled her eyes when I talked about literature. How she once told me, "You wouldn't survive a month without me." That night, I also mentioned the one thing I'd never told anyone, the real reason we'd kept a second house in Cedar Falls. It wasn't to hide money. It was because of what Richard had discovered just before he died. A secret tied to his company. A mistake that could ruin his name if it ever surfaced. So he made me promise to keep that property and its contents under my name until everything was resolved. That's all. Nothing illegal, just personal, painful, and private. I kept that promise. Even after he passed, I left that little house locked untouched as if he might come back for it. And that's what Melissa didn't understand. She thought I was hoarding when in truth I was protecting her from something that could have destroyed the image she worshipped so much. Now after tonight, she'd twisted that silence into something ugly. I could still hear her whisper, "Don't expect a penny from me." The cruelty in her voice replayed like a broken record, but under all that hurt, there was something sharper realization. Because if she'd gone through my things, hacked into my emails, stolen my files to find that video, then she might have stumbled dangerously close to the truth Richard died guarding. And if she ever did, if she ever opened that safe in the Cedar Falls house, she'd learn what he'd hidden there. Not money, not jewelry, something far more valuable. I stood, wiped my eyes, and gathered the leftover plates. "Hank, dear kind." Hank came back to help. He looked at me quietly, eyes full of sympathy. "She went too far tonight, Maggie," he said softly. "You don't deserve that." I forced a smile. "It's fine. I've been through worse." He hesitated, then added, "You know, not all families' blood. Some of us stick around because we choose to." For the first time that night, I felt seen. When I finally drove home, the moonlight spilled over the dashboard. The empty passenger seat seemed to whisper with Richard's voice, calm, steady, certain. "She doesn't know what she's done, Maggie." And he was right. Because Melissa had just opened a door she'd never be able to close again. The next evening, Melissa called. Her voice was sugar sweet, the kind that sticks to your skin until it burns. "Mom," she said about last night, "let's not make it a big deal, okay? You embarrassed yourself enough." I sat in my kitchen, still in my old robe, a cup of cold coffee forgotten on the counter. "Embarrassed myself," I repeated. "You exposed a private video in front of 50 people. "Oh, stop acting like a victim," she snapped. "You said awful things about me. You were talking to yourself like some crazy woman." "I was talking to your father," I said quietly. A beat of silence. "Then Dad's gone. Maybe it's time you joined him if you're going to keep living in the past." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. Melissa. But she'd already hung up. That was how she operated now, throw a grenade, then walk away before the smoke cleared. By the time Saturday came, the gossip had already spread through our small town. A former student texted me asking if it was true that I had a secret fortune. Even my church ladies had questions. I felt the humiliation settle in like dust, quiet but impossible to clean out. And then, as if that weren't enough, Melissa called again. "We're having a family dinner at our place Sunday night, just close relatives. You should come. Let's make peace." I should have said no. Every instinct told me to stay home, but some stubborn part of me, maybe the part that still believed a mother's love could fix anything, said yes. Her house was in the new upscale neighborhood outside Portland, all gray stone and glass. When I pulled up, the driveway was already lined with shiny SUVs. Through the big windows, I saw a long dining table set with white china and wine glasses that probably cost more than my monthly pension. When Melissa opened the door, she smiled like a hostess welcoming a stranger. "Mom, you made it. Everyone's here." Her husband, Ryan, kissed me on the cheek, the kind of kiss that meant nothing. He worked in real estate, always smelled of cologne and ambition. "Good to see you, Margaret," he said. "Hope there's no hard feelings about the little video mix-up." Little mix-up. I almost laughed. Inside, her in-laws were already seated. They never liked me much. Too old-fashioned, as her mother-in-law Diane once said. There was also Melissa's cousin, her husband, and little Ella coloring quietly at the end of the table. Dinner started fine. Superficial talk, weather, politics, the price of housing. But beneath it, tension crackled like static. I noticed the way Melissa kept glancing at her phone, smirking at Ryan. Something was brewing. Halfway through the meal, Diane lifted her wine glass and said sweetly, "So, Margaret, I heard you've been quite the financial wizard, Two Houses' secret savings. Maybe you should be giving us advice." Everyone laughed, except me. Melissa pretended to look shocked. "Oh, Diane, don't tease her. Mom's just private about her money." My throat went dry. "That's enough, Melissa." She tilted her head. Why? You don't want people to know how generous you've been with yourself, Ryan joined in, grinning. Hey, if she's sitting on a gold mine, maybe she'll finally help with Ella's tuition. We're just trying to give her the best, you know? I stared at the tablecloth. I already gave you $80,000 for that. The room went silent. Melissa's smile froze. Diane raised her eyebrows. Oh dear, you lend money to your own daughter. I didn't lend it, I said quietly. I gave it. Melissa's voice dropped. You make it sound like charity. It was love, I whispered. But you turned it into debt. Ryan set his glass down hard. Okay, that's enough guilt tripping for one night. Guilt tripping, I repeated. My hands trembled. You humiliated me in front of my friends. You broke into my private files. And now you're playing the martyr again. Melissa cut in. You've been lying for years, Mom. Dad wasn't some perfect man. You know what he did with that second house. I froze. What do you think? You know. Ryan smirked. Come on, Margaret. You really think we wouldn't find the safe? My stomach dropped. What did you do? Oh, relax, Melissa said. We didn't take anything. Yet. But maybe you should stop pretending it's some noble secret. Dad probably left something shady in there. Maybe that's why you kept it locked. Diane leaned back, enjoying the show. Well, every family has skeletons, right? That did it. The humiliation was unbearable. I pushed my chair back and stood. You invited me here to shame me. Melissa's tone softened almost mockingly. No, Mom. I invited you here so you could stop lying. You act like the victim, but you've been hiding everything. Dad's will, his accounts, the safe. We deserve to know what's ours. Yours, I repeated. Richard left everything to me. Every penny he earned, every sacrifice, it was ours. You weren't there when he worked through pneumonia just to keep you in college. You weren't there when I pawned my wedding ring to pay your rent. Her eyes filled with something like rage or guilt. I didn't ask for that. No, I said, my voice shaking. You just took and forgot. The room was dead quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Even little Ella had stopped coloring, staring at us with wide eyes. Then Diane muttered under her breath, well, some people don't know when to let go of control. That was when something inside me cracked. I'm not controlling, I said. I'm surviving. Melissa's jaw tightened. Keep your stories, Mom. But when the truth comes out, and it will, don't expect me to protect you. I looked at her long and hard, memorizing her face. I never asked you to. When I turned to leave, Ella ran to me, hugging my leg. Don't cry, Grandma, she whispered. You're still good. Her small voice steadied me more than anything else could. I kissed her forehead, then walked out without saying another word. Behind me, I heard Melissa sigh. She'll learn, eventually. But as I stepped into the cool night air, one thought burned through my chest. She's the one who's about to learn. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the kitchen window watching the headlights crawl past the empty street, a blanket wrapped around my shoulders like armor. The silence in my house was so heavy, it almost hummed. By morning, I told myself I'd let it go, that I wouldn't give Melissa the satisfaction of knowing how deeply she'd cut me. But pain has a way of leaking through even the smallest cracks. 2 days later, I stopped by the local diner for breakfast, the same booth I'd been sitting in for years, the one near the window where the morning sun hit the Formica table just right. Hank was already there reading the paper and sipping his black coffee. You look like you wrestled with ghosts all night, he said, lowering the paper. Maybe I did, I muttered, stirring my coffee. He didn't press. Hank never did. He was one of those men who believed that silence could be kinder than advice. But as the waitress set down my plate of scrambled eggs, I noticed something. At the next booth, 2 women from my church were whispering, glancing my way. She's the one they were talking about, one murmured. The teacher with the secret fortune. I froze. The other chuckled softly. Her daughter said she's hiding money from the family. Can you imagine? I wanted to sink through the floor. When I looked up, Hank was watching me, eyes full of quiet fury. You want me to say something? No, I whispered. Just let them talk. But their voices grew louder. She's probably one of those old hoarders. You'd think teachers would know how to manage their lives better. My fork clattered against the plate. Every word felt like a slap. Finally, I stood up. If you have something to say, I said sharply, say it to me, not about me. The women froze. One of them blinked guilty, but defiant. We didn't mean any harm, Margaret. It's just people talk. You can't blame your daughter for being honest. Honest. My voice trembled, but I didn't back down. She humiliated me. She stole from me. She invaded my home. The diner went silent. Even the cook paused behind the counter. The woman gave a tight smile. Maybe she's just worried. Kids these days think older folks. Older folks, I interrupted. You mean the people who raised them, paid their tuition, sacrificed every dream so they could live comfortably. My hands were shaking now, not from fear, but rage. She called me a liar in front of strangers. She told me not to expect a penny from her. And you think she's worried? No one spoke. The only sound was the faint buzz of the neon sign outside. Then Hank stood up. All right, that's enough, he said, his voice calm but firm. Margaret's one of the finest people in this town. She's helped more kids than half the folks here combined. If you've got gossip to spread, at least have the guts to get your facts right. The two women shrank in their seats. We didn't mean... Yeah, you did, Hank said. You just didn't think she'd hear it. He turned to me. Come on, Maggie. Let's get out of here. Outside, the cold air bit at my cheeks, but it felt cleaner than the air inside that diner. I shouldn't have lost my temper, I said, voice shaking. He shrugged. You didn't lose it. You took it back. We walked for a while down the quiet street lined with old maples. I told him everything about the party, the video, the dinner, the safe. He listened in hands in his jacket pocket, saying nothing until the end. Finally, he said, You think she's after what's in that house? She's already been there, I whispered. She mentioned the safe. And you're sure there's something important inside? I hesitated. Richard told me never to open it until the right time. He said it would explain everything, the late nights, the missing money, the second property. I never asked questions. I trusted him. Hank nodded slowly. Maybe it's time you stopped trusting the dead and started protecting yourself from the living. His words hit hard. That afternoon, I drove to Cedar Falls, a 2-hour ride through winding roads and fading autumn light. The old house sat at the edge of the woods, half hidden by tall grass and pine trees. The paint peeled, the porch sagged, but it was still ours. When I stepped inside, the air smelled of cedar and dust. Everything was just as we'd left it, furniture covered in sheets, photos turned face down. And then I saw it, the safe. Heavy black tucked beneath the staircase, the same one Richard had installed himself. My name was scratched faintly into the metal MC. I knelt down, my hands trembling as I touched the cold steel. Richard, I whispered, what did you leave me? But before I could reach for the key, headlights flashed outside. I froze. A car door slammed. Footsteps crunched on the gravel. Then a familiar voice called out sharp and impatient. Mom, are you in there, Melissa? I shut my eyes, panic surging through me. How did she know I was here? The front door creaked open. You shouldn't have come, she said, stepping inside, her voice echoing in the empty room. You should have just told me what's in that safe. I rose slowly, heart pounding. You followed me. She smiled coldly. You never were good at keeping secrets, Mom. The look in her eyes wasn't anger anymore. It was something worse, desperation. She glanced at the safe, then back at me. Give me the key. I shook my head. You don't even know what's in there. I don't care, she said. If it's valuable, it's mine too. I stepped between her and the safe. It's not yours. It never was. Her face twisted. You think you can keep everything after everything I've done for you, everything you've done. I laughed bitterly. You've taken, lied, stolen. Melissa's hand clenched. For a moment, I thought she might actually hit me. Then a new voice came from the doorway, deep, steady, familiar. Step away from her. It was Hank. He'd followed me. And thank God he had. Melissa turned, startled. What are you doing here? He folded his arms, making sure she gets home alive. For the first time that night, I saw fear flicker in her eyes. And that was when I realized this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about control. And I was done. Surrendering it 2 days after the confrontation at the Cedar Falls house, an official-looking envelope appeared in my mailbox. Heavy cream paper printed with Portland Legal Associates. My hands went cold before I even opened it. Inside was a letter, formal, cold, lifeless, stating that my daughter, Melissa Caldwell Ryan, was filing for temporary conservatorship over my financial affairs. The words blurred on the page. On the basis of erratic behavior, mental instability, and risk of financial mismanagement. For a moment I couldn't breathe. I read it again slower this time, trying to process what it meant. Melissa, my daughter, was petitioning the court to take control of my money, my property, my life. The next morning I drove straight to her office. She worked at a marketing firm downtown, all glass and steel, and people in suits too young to understand consequence. When I walked in, the receptionist looked startled, probably because I didn't belong in that shiny place with my thrift store coat and trembling hands. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Tell Melissa her mother's here." Her tone stiffened. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Caldwell, she's in a meeting." "She'll see me," I said quietly, and she did. Melissa came out of her office 5 minutes later, phone in hand. Expression perfect, like nothing had happened. "Mom, you really shouldn't show up here. It's unprofessional." I held up the letter. "You're trying to take my life away from me." She sighed. "I'm trying to protect you. You've been making reckless decisions. Keeping money hidden. Driving out to abandoned houses in the middle of nowhere. Do you realize how that looks?" "You followed me there," I said. "I had to. You were acting paranoid. I'm worried about you." "Worried," I repeated bitterly. "That's what you call stealing, Mom," she said softly, placing a hand on my arm like she was consoling a stranger. "I'm not stealing. I'm saving you from yourself. You're old, you're alone, you're confused." I pulled away from her touch. "You have no idea what I am." She smiled that condescending smile I'd come to hate. "I have every idea I'm your daughter. When I walked out of that building, I didn't even feel my legs moving. It was like my body had gone on autopilot, numb, heavy, useless. That night, Hank came over with takeout and 2 beers. I wasn't hungry, but I needed to hear someone else breathe in that house. "She's trying to get conservatorship," he asked, frowning as he read the letter. "That's serious, Maggie." "I know," I said. "If the court grants it, she can access my accounts, sell my property, even decide where I live." He rubbed his chin. "She's building a case. Probably got her husband's lawyer to draft this." "I think she's already taken money," I whispered. "I checked my accounts this morning. 2 transfers, $40,000 each, missing from my savings, both labeled joint beneficiary access." Hank looked up. "You had her listed as a joint beneficiary. She convinced me after Richard died. Said it was for emergencies." He cursed under his breath. "You need a lawyer fast. I can't afford one," I said, voice cracking. "Not anymore." He leaned closer. "You got me, Maggie. We'll figure it out." The next few days blurred together phone calls, paperwork, humiliation. I had to sit in a small courtroom under harsh fluorescent lights while Melissa's lawyer spoke about me like I wasn't there, Mrs. "Caldwell's recent behavior demonstrates a concerning decline in judgment," he said smoothly. "There are documented instances of erratic spending, emotional instability, and paranoia involving imaginary assets and secret recordings." Imaginary assets. Secret recordings. They made me sound insane. When it was my turn to speak, my throat locked. "Those weren't imaginary," I said softly. "My husband left something important, something private." "She's twisting it." The judge looked at me over her glasses. "Mrs. Caldwell, do you have proof of what's in this alleged safe?" "No," I whispered. "But then we'll proceed, based on available evidence." Melissa sat there stone-faced, her hand resting gently on Ryan's. When the hearing ended, she approached me outside. "I told you, Mom," she said softly. "You should have trusted me." "Trust you?" I almost laughed. "You're trying to erase me. I'm protecting our legacy," she said, lowering her voice. "If Dad left something valuable, I'm not letting you waste it." I stepped closer, my voice trembling, but sharp. "It wasn't money, Melissa. It was truth. And truth doesn't belong to you." Her smile faded. "We'll see what the court decides." After she walked away, I stood there in the drizzle, my paperwork soaked through my heart hollow. I thought about Richard, about how he'd once said, "The people who hurt you most will always call it love." He was right. That night, I went through every file I had, every old key, every notebook Richard ever kept. I found a small flash drive taped behind a photo frame in his study. On it was a single file labeled Confidential, CF Property. When I opened it, my heart stopped. It was a scanned document dated 6 months before Richard died, showing that he had sold Caldwell Paper Supply, the company he'd worked for decades, for nearly $2.7 million. But the buyer wasn't listed as Melissa or me. It was marked, Anonymous Trust Beneficiary to be revealed upon verification of Clause 8. Clause 8. I scrolled down. It read, Beneficiary to be determined based on final recorded statement kept within safe Cedar Falls residence. My blood ran cold. That safe wasn't just sentimental, it contained Richard's final directive. Whoever held that document controlled everything, and if Melissa found it before I did... I snapped the laptop shut. My hands trembled. Hank's voice echoed in my head. Maybe it's time you stopped trusting the dead and started protecting yourself from the living. He was right again. I packed a bag, tucked the flash drive into my coat pocket, and made a call to a man I hadn't spoken to in 20 years, Richard's old lawyer, Samuel Everett. When he answered, his tone was wary. "Margaret, my God, it's been ages. I need your help," I said. "It's about Richard and the Cedar Falls property." There was a pause. Then his voice dropped low. "So it's finally come to that." "What do you mean?" I whispered. He sighed. "Richard told me this day would come. And he told me that when it did, I'd need to show you something." I gripped the phone tighter. "Show me what A recording," he said. "A video Richard made, one you were never supposed to see until your daughter came after you." My knees nearly gave out. He knew. "Yes," Samuel said quietly. He knew exactly what kind of storm she'd bring. The next morning, I drove through steady rain toward downtown Portland windshield wipers, slapping in rhythm with my pulse. I hadn't spoken to Samuel Everett in over 2 decades. He'd handled Richard's company contracts and the sale of our first home. A cautious, precise man, the kind who measured every word before speaking it. When I arrived, his office looked almost unchanged from the last time I'd been there. Heavy oak furniture, dusty law books lining the shelves, the smell of paper and old coffee. Samuel himself looked older, but sharp silver hair, neatly combed glasses perched low on his nose. He rose when I entered. "Margaret," he said softly, "you look just like the day Richard brought you here, though I wish this meeting were under happier circumstances." I sat down, dripping rain onto the carpet. "You said you had something for me. A recording." He nodded, pulling out a small locked box from his drawer. "Richard left this with me the week before his heart attack. He told me to give it to you only when you contacted me first and only if your daughter had started what he called the reckoning." My breath caught. He used that word, he did. Samuel handed me a small flash drive. This is what he recorded. "But Margaret, before you see it, I need you to understand something. What Richard wasn't just trying to protect money. He was protecting a truth that could destroy reputations, not just his, but your daughter's husband's family, too." I frowned. "Ryan's family," Samuel nodded grimly. "Caldwell Paper Supply wasn't sold cleanly. There were illegal transfers. Ryan's father was part of that. Richard found out right before he died. He created that trust to ensure Melissa wouldn't marry into that corruption without consequence. He left a clause that tied everything, the company, the fortune, the trust, to one condition: that the rightful heir must act with integrity when the truth came out. I felt the blood drain from my face. He knew she wouldn't. That's why he left the evidence in the safe at Cedar Falls," Samuel said. "And why he left me this." He pushed the flash drive toward me. "I haven't seen it myself. But whatever's on there, it's for you." I took it with trembling hands. "I don't even know how to face her anymore." Samuel sighed. "You don't have to face her yet. Let the truth speak first." That night, I sat alone in my living room laptop, open curtains drawn. The rain outside hadn't stopped. It pattered softly against the window like a steady heartbeat. My reflection looked ghostly in the screen as I inserted the drive. The file blinked to life. And there he was. Richard. His hair was grayer, his face thinner than I remembered, but his eyes, kind, steady, knowing, made my throat tighten. He sat in his old workshop, the wooden shelves behind him filled with blueprints and dusty ledgers. "If you're watching this," he began, "then it means Melissa has made her move." I gasped. He'd known. He continued, voice calm but firm. "I always hoped it wouldn't come to this, Maggie. You loved her too much to see what she was becoming. But I saw it, the entitlement, the hunger. She married Ryan because she thought he'd secure her comfort. She never realized his family's fortune came from laundering contracts through our company." He picked up a folder and tapped it gently. "These documents, the ones in the Cedar Falls safe, they prove everything. Payments made under false names, kickbacks, fraud. I covered for them once, but I couldn't live with it. So I kept copies notarized and sealed. If Melissa or Ryan ever tried to claim my estate through deceit, this would disqualify them under Clause 8. Clause 8. The mysterious line from the trust." Richard looked directly at the camera, now his voice lowering. "You'll find my final letter in the envelope marked with our wedding date. That letter names the true beneficiary, and it isn't Melissa." My hand shook. He continued softer now. "You've always believed people could change, Maggie. But sometimes they don't want to. Sometimes love blinds us to their cruelty. When that happens, the best thing we can do is let the truth expose them." He paused, as if gathering his thoughts. "I'm sorry I left you with this burden, but I couldn't trust anyone else. You'll know what to do when the time comes. And when you open that safe, don't be afraid of what you find. It's not just paperwork, it's freedom." Then he smiled, weary but tender. "And if she tries to take everything from you, remember, I already made sure she can't." The screen went black. I sat there for a long time, the rain whispering against the glass. When I finally stood, my legs felt unsteady. I walked to the closet, pulled out the small tin box where I kept Richard's old house keys, including the brass one labeled CF for Cedar Falls. I held it tight in my fist. He trusted me to finish what he started. The next morning, I met Hank at the diner again. He was waiting in the booth, 2 coffees already poured. "You look different," he said, "like you've seen a ghost." "I have," I said, simply sliding the flash drive across the table. He turned it over in his hand. "What's on it?" "The truth," I said, "and enough evidence to bring Ryan's family down." He let out a low whistle. "And Melissa, she's already in too deep. She just doesn't know it yet." I looked out the window, watching the early morning sun rise over the quiet town. "I'm going back to Cedar Falls tonight. I'm opening that safe." Hank nodded slowly. "You want me there?" "Yes," I said. "I'm done being scared." He smiled. "Then you won't be alone." For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: control. The truth was finally within reach. But somewhere deep down, a chill crept through me, because Richard's last words echoed in my head. It's not just paperwork. It's freedom. And I couldn't shake the feeling that freedom might come with a price. The drive to Cedar Falls that evening felt heavier than the miles themselves. The sky had turned the color of bruised steel clouds, hanging low like secrets ready to burst. Hank drove his old Chevy beside me, headlights cutting through the fog as we turned down the narrow road that led to the house Richard had kept hidden all those years. The property looked even lonelier at night. The porch light flickered weakly as if the house itself was holding its breath. I parked, stepped out, and the air hit me sharp cold, carrying the faint scent of pine and rust. "You sure about this?" Hank asked, locking his truck. I nodded. "I need to see what he left behind." Inside, the floorboards creaked under our weight. I flicked on a lamp, its glow spilling across the faded wallpaper and dust-draped furniture. The house smelled like time-stale air and forgotten promises. The safe sat in the same place under the staircase, quiet and unassuming. My hands trembled as I slid the brass key into the lock. For a second, it didn't turn, then with a soft click, it gave way. Inside was a neat stack of documents, sealed envelopes, and one small black box with a red ribbon tied around it. On top lay a handwritten note in Richard's neat, deliberate script for Maggie when she's ready to know everything. My throat tightened. Hank stayed back watching quietly as I opened the note. If you found this, it means Melissa's greed has surfaced, and with it the truth. Inside this box is the proof of what Ryan's family did, and the clause that determines who inherits everything. But Maggie, it's not about money. It's about clearing my name and protecting yours. Once you reveal this, there's no turning back. Trust Hank. He's the one man I knew would still stand beside you. I looked up at Hank, eyes blurring. He mentioned you. Hank blinked, surprised. Me, I only knew him from church. I smiled faintly. Apparently that was enough. I untied the ribbon and opened the box. Inside lay a flash drive and a folded envelope stamped "Confidential Trust Records." Beneath it, a single photo Richard standing beside another man, older with the same square jaw as Ryan. "That's Ryan's father," I whispered. "Thomas Grayson." Hank frowned. "He's the guy who runs half the real estate business in Portland." "Ran," I said quietly. "He died last year." Hank nodded slowly. "Then Ryan's the one holding the pieces now." I inserted the flash drive into my laptop. A folder appeared with scanned contracts, emails, and one video labeled Project Clearview, internal. When I opened it, the image was shaky, filmed on an old camcorder. Richard's voice came first, steady but tense. "This is Richard Caldwell. It's February 2nd, 2018. What you're seeing is documentation of illegal contract laundering through Caldwell Paper Supply, directed by Thomas Grayson and confirmed by Ryan Grayson. They've used company funds to purchase undeclared properties and move federal grant money offshore." The camera panned to a desk covered in ledgers and signed checks, Ryan's signature clear as day. Hank whistled low. "That's enough to bury him." But the video wasn't over. Richard's voice continued. "I kept copies of every transaction. I wanted to confront them, but I got sick before I could. If something happens to me, this evidence goes to my wife. She'll know what to do." Then quieter, almost a whisper, "And if Melissa sides with them, tell her I forgave her long before she betrayed me." The screen went dark. I sat there, frozen tears spilling before I could stop them. Hank placed a hand on my shoulder. He knew Maggie. He knew how this would play out. I nodded, my breath shaking. He left everything for me to find. "But how do I even fight them? Melissa's already taken half of what I own." "Not for long," Hank said firmly. "This is criminal evidence. You bring this to the police, they'll tear her and Ryan's case apart." I closed the laptop, staring at the safe. Something still didn't feel right. I looked again inside the envelopes, the papers, the old notebooks. And then I saw it. A small silver key taped beneath the top shelf. "What's this?" I murmured. Hank peered closer. Safe inside a safe, I found a second compartment smaller, hidden behind the first panel. It took a minute to fit the key, but when it turned, I gasped. Inside was a stack of bank certificates, millions of dollars worth of trust bonds, but the name on them wasn't Richard's or Melissa's. It was Ella Caldwell-Wren, my granddaughter. I sank to the floor, staring at the documents. "He left everything to Ella," I whispered. "He must have changed it before he died." That's what Clause 8 meant, the beneficiary chosen by integrity. She's the only innocent one left. Hank crouched beside me, shaking his head in awe. He outsmarted all of them, but my joy was short-lived. Headlights flashed outside the window. A car door slammed. I froze. "Please tell me that's not who I think it is," Hank muttered. Then came the sound of Melissa's voice, sharp and angry, echoing through the night. "Mom, I know you're in there. Open the door." I felt my chest tighten. "How does she always know she's been watching you?" Hank said grimly. "She's tracking your car, maybe even your phone." I reached for the flash drive and the papers. "We can't let her find this." The front door rattled violently. "Mom, don't make this worse," Hank whispered. "Back door. Go now." We slipped out through the kitchen, the night swallowing us whole. As we ran toward the woods, I could hear Melissa's voice growing louder behind us. "Where is it, Mom? I know you opened it." The rain started again, masking our footsteps. My heart pounded as I clutched the envelope against my chest. By the time we reached Hank's truck, we were drenched, breathless, shaking. Hank started the engine. "We've got what we need, but she's not going to stop." I looked down at the wet envelope in my lap, the words, "Beneficiary." Ella Caldwell, Ryan barely visible through the paper. "No," I said, voice trembling. "She won't stop until she has nothing left to lose." As we drove off into the dark, thunder rolled above us like a warning, and for the first time, I realized the real storm hadn't even begun. The next morning, the storm had washed the streets clean, but inside me, nothing felt calm. My hands still shook from the night before. Every creak of the house made me jump. Melissa's voice still echoed in my mind, angry, desperate, feral. I sat at the kitchen table with Hank, the envelope spread open between us. Steam rose from his coffee mug, curling like the plans forming in my head. "She knows now," I said quietly. "She knows I opened the safe." "Then she knows she's lost," Hank replied. I shook my head. "No. Melissa doesn't quit when she's cornered. She'll burn the house down before she admits defeat." He leaned forward. "Then we make sure she can't." I glanced down at the documents again, the proof of fraud, the trust papers, and the one that mattered most, Ella Caldwell Rin. Sole beneficiary. Richard had done what I couldn't. He trusted the only person still pure in this mess, a child. But if Melissa or Ryan found out they'd destroy it, I looked at Hank. "We can't keep this here." He nodded. "Then we move it. Somewhere she'll never look." That afternoon, we drove into town. I wore a hooded coat and dark glasses like some fugitive from my own life. Hank parked behind Everett and Company, the law office where Samuel worked. When we walked in, Samuel was already waiting. "You look like you've seen the devil himself," he said, eyeing the damp envelope clutched in my hands. "Close," Hank muttered. I handed over the papers. "These are what Richard left. The trust, the bank certificates, everything. It proves Ryan and his father laundered money through Caldwell paper and that Richard changed the beneficiary before he died." Samuel adjusted his glasses, scanning the pages carefully. "Good Lord, then this is irrefutable. The signatures, the dates, it's airtight. If this goes public, Ryan's family empire collapses." I folded my arms. "I don't want it to collapse. I just want my name cleared and my granddaughter protected." Samuel nodded. "Then we'll take quiet steps first. I'll store these in a sealed legal vault under my custody. We'll register the trust in Ella's name privately without alerting Melissa. It'll take a few days." A few days. The words made me uneasy. Melissa didn't give people days. She gave them minutes. What if she comes for me before that I asked? Samuel hesitated, then handed me a small black folder. Richard anticipated that too. He drafted an emergency will naming you the temporary guardian of Ella's estate until she turns 18. Legally, Melissa has no claim unless she can prove you unfit. I almost laughed. She's already trying to do that. Then it's time to stop playing defense. Samuel said, eyes narrowing. "Let me contact someone at the State Fraud Bureau off the record. They'll take interest in this." I nodded slowly. "Do it." That night, I returned home to find my mailbox stuffed with papers, legal notices, bills, even letters from the court about the conservatorship hearing. Melissa was relentless. She'd frozen my secondary bank account. She'd transferred the title of my car pending verification. She'd even sent a notice to my pension administrator claiming I was mentally unstable. Each envelope felt like another nail hammered into the coffin of my old life. But I didn't cry this time. I gathered every letter, placed them neatly into a folder, and labeled it evidence. If Melissa wanted war, I'd give her one quietly, cleanly, and legally. The next morning, I made my move. At dawn, I went to the First National Bank of Lakewood, the same place where Melissa once opened her first savings account at 10 years old. The same teller, an older woman named Donna, was still there. "Morning, Margaret," she said kindly. "Haven't seen you in a while." I smiled faintly. "Just a little business to take care of." She nodded. "Of course." "What do you need?" "I want to open a new trust account," I said, sliding a note across the counter. "Ella Caldwell Ransom, private beneficiary account, non-disclosed guardian." Donna's eyebrows lifted slightly, but she didn't ask questions. "And who will be the trustee?" I met her eyes. "Me. Until she's ready." By the time I left, a new account existed in Ella's name, hidden, protected, and out of Melissa's reach. Hank was waiting outside in his truck. "How'd it go?" I smiled faintly. "Better than expected." He grinned. "That's my girl." But just as I reached for the passenger door, a sleek black car pulled into the lot. Melissa stepped out, dressed in a charcoal suit, sunglasses masking her expression. My heart skipped. She walked straight toward me. "Mom." I froze. "Melissa." She looked from me to Hank, then back, still hanging around him, huh? "You really do love playing the helpless widow. Why are you here?" I asked. "To make you an offer. I'm not interested." "You should be," she said coolly, lowering her sunglasses. "Because if you don't cooperate, I'll make sure the court fast-tracks your conservatorship hearing. You'll lose the house, your accounts, even your pension. You'll be living off charity before summer." I stared at her steady now. "You think you've already won, don't you?" "I know I have," she said. "You're old, you're tired, and no one believes you anymore. So do yourself a favor, sign over what's left of Dad's estate, and I'll make sure you keep the house." I almost smiled. "You sound just like your father did when he was negotiating contracts, except he never lied to me." Her eyes narrowed. "You have no idea what you're doing, Mom." "Oh, I do," I said softly. "For the first time, I really do." She took a step closer. "This isn't a game." "No," I whispered. "It's justice." Before she could respond, Hank stepped between us. "You heard her, Melissa. Time to go." She glared at him, then turned on her heel and walked back to her car. "You'll regret this, both of you," she called out. As her car disappeared down the road, Hank looked at me. "You okay?" I exhaled shakily. "She's bluffing. She has no idea the trust is already out of her hands." "Good," Hank said. "Then we just keep it that way until Samuel finishes his work." I nodded. "And when he does," he smiled grimly, "then we go public." That night, I sat by the window with Ella asleep in the next room. She'd come for a weekend visit, innocent to everything swirling around her. I watched her chest rise and fall, her little hand clutching that same teddy bear she'd defended me with at the party. And for the first time, I didn't feel powerless, because the real battle wasn't about money anymore. It was about legacy, and mine had just begun to fight back. But as I turned off the lamp and looked out into the quiet street, a dark shape moved near the mailbox. A figure in black, watching. My stomach dropped. Melissa wasn't bluffing. The war had come to my doorstep. That night, sleep never came. Every shadow outside my window looked like movement. Every whisper of wind felt like footsteps. Around 2:00 a.m., the motion light flicked on in my driveway. I crept to the window, my heart pounding. The rain had started again, thin, steady sheets that made everything shimmer. Through the blur, I saw it, a dark SUV idling at the curb, headlights off. I couldn't see the driver, but I didn't need to. I knew. Melissa. I stood there for nearly a minute, frozen, until the SUV finally drove away. But that fear, that invasive, crawling fear, lingered long after the taillights vanished. By dawn, I'd packed a small overnight bag just in case. I made coffee, called Hank, and told him what I'd seen. "She's watching you now," he said grimly. "You can't stay alone anymore. Come to my place for a few nights." "I can't," I said. "If I leave, she'll think she scared me off. I need to finish this." "Maggie," he sighed, "you're not 20 anymore." "No," I said softly, "but I've spent my whole life being quiet. I'm done doing that." By mid-morning, I was sitting across from Detective Nora Grayson at the local precinct. Irony stung. Ryan's sister worked in law enforcement, but this woman wasn't her. This Nora had kind eyes and a calm tone that didn't make me feel like a crazy old woman. I slid the folder across her desk. "These are financial records, stolen money, forged contracts, everything my husband discovered before he died." She looked through the pages slowly. "This is detailed," she said. "If these are real, it's enough to open an investigation." "They're real," I said firmly. "But I can't have my daughter knowing I came here." "Your daughter. She's married to Ryan Grayson, Thomas Grayson's son." Nora's brow furrowed. "Then this connects to the Grayson accounts we've had flagged for years." I froze. "You've been investigating them off and on," she said carefully. "We never had concrete proof. Until now." She looked up at me, her voice softening. "Mrs. Caldwell, what you've done tonight might change everything, but it was only a few hours later that everything changed again for me. When I returned home, the front door was unlocked. I froze in the entryway. My breath caught in my throat. I knew I'd locked it that morning. The air felt wrong, heavier somehow. My mug lay shattered on the floor, drawers half open. The scent of my lavender perfume lingered faintly in the air, but it wasn't comforting. It was mocking. And then I saw it, the living room cabinet, the one where I'd kept Richard's journals and the backup flash drive, empty. My knees went weak. "No," I whispered. I rushed through the house. The files from the dining table gone. The folder marked, "Evidence gone." Only one thing remained, a single sheet of paper taped to the mirror. Melissa's handwriting, neat, deliberate. "You should have listened to me." For a long time, I couldn't move. The paper fluttered slightly in the air from the open door, taunting me. Then I grabbed my phone and called Hank. "She's been here," I said, my voice shaking. "She took everything." "I'm coming," he said. Within 20 minutes, his truck pulled up. He stormed in, scanning the damage. "She broke in, or had a key," I whispered. "She still has one from before." Hank clenched his jaw. "Call the police." "I can't," I said. "Not yet. If I report it, she'll deny everything and the files are gone. I have no proof left." He looked at me hard. "Then what do we do now?" I swallowed, trying to steady my voice. "We don't fight her head on. We make her think she's won." He frowned. "You mean yes," I said. "We let her dig her own grave." Over the next few days, I went silent. No calls, no emails, no messages to Melissa. Let her think I was broken. I stayed inside curtains, drawn, pretending defeat. Then on the 4th day, the letter came. A thick, embossed envelope from the Court of Multnomah County. Hearing notice petition for permanent conservatorship of Margaret Caldwell. Melissa had wasted no time. But this time, I didn't panic, because Samuel had already filed the registration for Ella's trust. The documents were sealed, verified, and legally binding. Whatever Melissa thought she'd stolen, she was already too late. When I told Hank, he grinned. "So we sit back and watch it burn?" "Not quite," I said. "We make sure the right people are watching when it does." The court date arrived faster than I expected. Melissa stood before the judge in a crisp navy suit, hair perfect, voice full of concern. "My mother is no longer capable of managing her affairs. She's paranoid, unstable, and has made several large irrational transfers in recent weeks." I sat there quietly, hands folded in my lap, pretending to tremble. The judge turned to me. "Mrs. Caldwell, do you have anything to say in response?" I looked up, my voice small but steady. "Only that I've made mistakes, trusting the wrong people, keeping too many secrets. But I am of sound mind, and I can prove it." Melissa's lawyer scoffed. With what evidence? I turned to the back of the courtroom. Samuel Everett rose from his seat carrying a briefcase. "With this," he said calmly. He walked forward, placing the documents before the judge. "Your Honor, this is the registered trust of the late Richard Caldwell, verified and notarized 3 days ago. It includes updated beneficiary designations and evidence of corporate fraud involving the petitioner's spouse." The judge's brows rose. "Corporate fraud." Melissa turned white. "That's a lie." Samuel handed her a copy. "Then perhaps you should recognize your own husband's signature." Gasps rippled through the room. Ryan wasn't there conveniently on business. Melissa looked at me, eyes wild. "You set me up." I smiled faintly. "No, dear, you did that yourself." The judge cleared her throat. "Mrs. Ryan, until these claims are investigated, this court will not grant your petition. In fact, I strongly advise you to seek legal counsel regarding these accusations." Melissa's composure cracked. "You can't do this to me." I met her eyes, calm, steady, unflinching. "I already did." Outside the courthouse, Hank waited on the steps. When he saw my face, he grinned. "Judging by that look, I'd say you just landed the first punch." I exhaled, almost laughing. More like Richard did, from the grave. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Melissa wouldn't stop now, not after being humiliated in court. She'd come back harder, desperate, reckless. And as much as I'd won today, I could feel it something darker still waiting beneath the surface. Because Ryan hadn't shown up. Because someone had been watching from the corner of the courtroom, a man in a black suit I didn't recognize, but whose gaze followed me as I left. The real danger, I realized, wasn't Melissa anymore. It was whoever she'd brought into this war. The day after the hearing, I woke to silence, the kind that makes the air feel too still, too aware. For the first time in months, my phone wasn't buzzing with legal notices or threats from Melissa's lawyer. But peace didn't feel safe anymore. It felt staged. I brewed coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and tried to breathe like a person who wasn't waiting for something terrible. Then the knock came. 3 slow, heavy thuds. Hank was supposed to call before coming over. My heart jumped. I opened the door and froze. A tall man stood on my porch in a black suit raincoat draped over one arm, expression polite but cold. "Mrs. Caldwell." "Yes," I said slowly. He handed me a business card. "Special Agent David Ross, Federal Bureau of Investigation." The letters felt like ice under my fingertips. "I'd like to ask you a few questions," he said. 10 minutes later, he sat across from me in the living room, hands folded neatly. He spoke calmly, methodically, the way people do when they already know the answers. "We've been reviewing corporate fraud allegations against the Grayson family for years," he said. "Your husband's records, Mrs. Caldwell reopened that investigation." I nodded slowly. "Then you know what they did." He hesitated. "We do. But what you might not know is that Richard Caldwell was under federal protection when he died." The room tilted. "What?" He continued. "Your husband was cooperating with federal investigators. He provided early evidence of the Grayson fraud network. That trust he created, the one registered under your granddaughter's name, was designed to protect government-seized funds until the case could be closed." I gripped the edge of my chair. He never told me. He couldn't, Ross said. The operation was confidential. But after his death, someone accessed his files. Someone without clearance. Melissa. Ross leaned forward. "You mentioned a break-in recently, yes. My daughter took documents from this house. She's married to Ryan Grayson." He nodded grimly. "Then I'm afraid she's in serious danger. Ryan Grayson disappeared 2 nights ago. His company accounts were emptied offshore transfers totaling nearly $8 million. The people he worked with are looking for him." My stomach turned. People? Ross hesitated. "Investors, the kind that don't go through banks." That afternoon, I went to Samuel's office again. He was pacing when I arrived. "They've frozen Ryan's assets," he said. "Federal warrant issued this morning. And Melissa." "What about her? She's been subpoenaed." I exhaled shakily. "Good. Maybe she'll finally face what she's done." Samuel shook his head. "Maggie, you don't understand. They think you helped Richard hide the original assets, the ones tied to the fraud money. If they don't find proof otherwise, you could be implicated." I felt the blood drain from my face. "No, I didn't even know." He held up his hands. "I know. But the system doesn't care about feelings, only evidence. And if Melissa destroyed or altered anything she stole from you, it could look like you were covering it up." I sat down hard. "So she's dragged me down with her." "Not yet," Samuel said. "There's one last piece of evidence that can clear everything, Richard's final recording. He told me once there was another one, a video he left hidden in your old house. You said the safe had a false bottom, right?" I stared at him. "You think there's more? I'd bet my license on it." That night, Hank drove me back to Cedar Falls. The house was dark hollow, still carrying the scent of damp wood and memories. I walked to the safe beneath the stairs, the flashlight trembling in my hand. The first compartment was empty now. Melissa had taken everything. But when I felt along the back panel, my fingers brushed something loose. A faint click sounded. A false bottom slid out. Inside was a small black drive labeled in Richard's handwriting, "For Maggie, only when it's over." I plugged it into my laptop and the screen lit up with his face again, older this time, weaker. "Hi, sweetheart." He began, his voice rough but tender. "If you're watching this, it means everything's fallen apart and you probably think I've ruined your life. But I promise I did this to save it." He sighed. The FBI needed me to expose Thomas Grayson. But I realized Ryan was already continuing the same crimes, laundering money, falsifying contracts. I couldn't risk Melissa getting dragged in, so I transferred everything to an anonymous trust in Ella's name. The government doesn't know she's the beneficiary. They can't touch it. He leaned closer to the camera. If they find out, they'll try to seize it under federal law. You have to keep it safe until she's old enough to claim it. And Maggie, if Melissa ever betrays you, let her dig her own grave. The truth will outlive her lies." He smiled faintly. "I always knew you'd finish what I couldn't." The video ended. For a long time, I sat there numb. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Richard hadn't just left a secret, he'd left a ticking time bomb. Hank broke the silence. "So your husband was an informant, and your daughter just stole evidence from both the FBI and the criminals they were investigating." I closed the laptop slowly, "which means she's not just greedy now. She's in real danger." He nodded grimly. "And if she's smart, she knows it." The next day, Melissa called. Her voice shook, but it wasn't anger anymore. It was fear. "Mom, they're following me. There's a black car outside my apartment. Ryan's gone. His phone's disconnected." I stayed quiet. "Please," she whispered. "You have to help me." I closed my eyes. For years, I'd answered every call, given every dollar, forgiven every wound. But not this time. "You took everything from me," I said softly. "Even the things you didn't understand. I can't protect you from what you chose." "Mom," I hung up. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel guilt. I felt peace. A week later, federal agents arrested Ryan at a private airfield in Nevada. Melissa turned herself in shortly after, pale and trembling, clutching a lawyer's arm like a lifeline. She confessed to the break-ins, the theft, the lies, all in exchange for immunity. Her name would never fully recover. Neither would mine. But I didn't need revenge anymore. When the case closed, the court returned the Cedar Falls property and all remaining assets to me. The trust for Ella remained sealed untouchable until her 18th birthday. One quiet morning, I drove back to the lake house where the trees reflected perfectly in the still water. Hank joined me, bringing 2 cups of coffee. "So it's over," he said. I nodded. "Almost." He raised an eyebrow. "Almost?" I smiled faintly, staring at the sunrise. "Richard once told me freedom comes with a price." I finally understand what he meant. "Which is," Hank asked, "letting go." We sat there in silence, the sound of birds returning to the trees. In my coat pocket, I still carried Richard's final letter, the one that had been sealed beneath the recording. I opened it one last time. "Maggie, I knew you'd be strong enough to face them. The world may take everything, but it can't take your truth. Protect Ella. And when the time comes, tell her this money fades, but integrity never dies." I folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into my pocket. The lake shimmered under the morning light, calm and endless like the first breath after a storm. I wasn't broken anymore, just free. It took months for the storm to settle, but when it did, it left behind wreckage Melissa couldn't hide. Her face was everywhere on local news, on social media, even whispered about in grocery lines. The woman who tried to take her mother's estate, they called her. People loved a scandal, especially one that made them feel superior. Ryan's mugshot ran beside hers, the once slick real estate golden boy now looking hollow-eyed and defeated. The headlines were merciless: Portland couple tied to multi-million-dollar fraud case. FBI confirms Grayson family under federal investigation. The Grayson empire, every house company and stock tied to their name, crumbled overnight. Offices shuttered. Employees fled. Former partners denied ever knowing them. Ryan took a plea deal, trading prison time for cooperation. Melissa walked free on probation, but her life as she knew it was gone. And I, Margaret Caldwell, watched it all from my kitchen window while sipping the same instant coffee I'd made for 40 years. The irony didn't escape me. For decades, I'd been invisible. Now the town that once whispered about my hidden fortune whispered about my strength. But I didn't feel strong. Not yet. The first time Melissa came back to my door, it was raining. Of course it was. She stood there on my porch, soaked through, holding a plain envelope. "Mom," she said quietly, "please, I just need to talk." Hank was sitting in the living room watching through the curtain. I could feel his tension like static in the air. "I don't know if that's a good idea," he said softly. But I opened the door anyway. Melissa looked thinner, older somehow. Her hair hung limp, her makeup gone. The arrogance I'd grown used to was missing. "I don't want money," she said quickly. "I know it's over. I need to explain." I stepped aside wordlessly. She entered slowly, glancing around as though expecting ghosts. "I never wanted to hurt you," she began. I thought you were hiding things from me. I was scared of what I asked, that I'd die and leave you with nothing." Her eyes filled. "No, scared that you'd love him more than you loved me." That stopped me cold. For a second, I saw her not the calculating woman from court, not the stranger who'd betrayed me, but the little girl who used to wait at the window for her father to come home. "You're right," I said quietly. "I did love him more, but that never meant I loved you less." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I ruined everything, Mom. I can't fix it." "No," I said softly, "but you can face it." She nodded slowly, pulling out the envelope. "This is what's left. The flash drive, the statements, I took them. I'm giving them back. Maybe it doesn't matter now, but it's all I have to give. I took the envelope but didn't open it. You kept them all this time. I couldn't throw them away," she whispered. "I thought maybe someday—" She trailed off. "I know Ella hates me. I know I deserve that. But maybe someday you could tell her I wasn't all bad." I didn't answer right away. The sound of rain filled the silence between us. "I'll tell her the truth," I said finally. "That's all either of us can promise now." Melissa nodded, wiping her face. Then she turned toward the door, pausing only once to say, "You were right about Dad. He always saw through me. I wish I'd listened to him sooner." When the door closed, I stood there for a long time, envelope in hand, the smell of wet air filling the room. "Are you okay?" Hank asked from behind me. "Yes," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "For the first time, I think I am." The weeks that followed felt strange quiet, in a way that almost felt like healing. Ryan's sentencing made national news. 5 years in federal prison, restitution of $3.1 million, and a lifetime ban from corporate management. The Grayson name was finished. Melissa, barred from holding financial accounts over $10,000, moved into a small apartment near the coast. She worked part-time at a florist. A friend from church said she still carried a photo of Ella in her wallet. As for Ella, she began spending weekends with me again. At first, she was quiet, confused. But kids are resilient. Soon, she was laughing in my kitchen again, asking questions about her grandpa, the one she never really knew. One afternoon, she found the locket I kept in the drawer, the one Richard gave me the day she was born. Inside was a tiny picture of him holding her as a baby. "Grandpa looks happy," she said. "He was," I said softly. "He knew you'd be the best part of all of us." She smiled, then asked the one question I'd been waiting for. "Grandma, why does Mommy cry when she hears his name?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "Because sometimes, sweetheart, when we hurt the people we love most, the heart remembers longer than the mind can forgive." She thought about that, then hugged me tight. "I'll never hurt you." I smiled faintly, brushing her hair back. "That's what your mommy said once, too." A few weeks later, I stood at Richard's grave for the first time since the trial ended. The sky was overcast, the air cool and sweet. I brought lilies, his favorite. "I think you'd be proud," I said quietly. "She's learning, Richard. Slowly, but she's learning. You were right about everything, about the truth, the money, even about Hank." I smiled faintly. "He's been my anchor through all of this. You'd like him." A soft breeze passed through the trees, and for a moment I swore I could hear his voice again, warm, teasing. "Took you long enough, Maggie." I laughed softly, tears filling my eyes. "You always did have terrible timing." That evening, Hank and I sat on the porch, the sunset painting the horizon gold. He handed me a newspaper. The front page headline read, "Local Widow Clears Family Name in $8 million Fraud Scandal." Below it was a photo of me shaking hands with Detective Ross, the caption reading, "Integrity wins out." Hank chuckled. "Never thought I'd see your face in the paper." "Neither did I said. "And I hope I never do again," he grinned. "So what now?" I looked out at the fading sky. "Now I wait. For Ella to grow up. For time to do what courts can't." He raised his cup of coffee. "To waiting." I clinked mine against his. "To surviving." The cicadas sang the last light fading into night, and as the stars appeared one by one, I realized something I'd forgotten for years. I wasn't waiting for anyone's apology anymore. I'd already been given justice. The rest was peace. Spring came early that year. The air smelled of wet earth and apple blossoms, the kind of scent that carried memories whether you invited them or not. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, the house didn't feel haunted anymore. It was quiet, but not empty. I'd taken down the court documents from the refrigerator door, replaced them with drawings Ella made for me, stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun, Grandma and me, written in wobbly letters. Every morning when I made coffee, I looked at that picture first. It reminded me why I'd fought so hard, not for revenge, not for pride, but for the small, fragile things that survive after the storms pass. Hank came by every Sunday now. Sometimes we'd drive to the farmer's market, sometimes just sit on the porch saying nothing at all. Silence between friends can be the most healing sound in the world. "You've got your light back," he said one morning, watching me set out garden pots near the porch steps. I smiled. "Maybe I finally stopped watering weeds," he chuckled. "That's one way to put it." He handed me a small envelope. "This came for you at my place by mistake." It was postmarked from the Oregon coast. My chest tightened when I saw the handwriting Melissa's. Inside was a single page folded neatly. "Mom, I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I got a job offer from a local community center. They help families rebuild after financial loss." Ironic, right? I'm trying to make things right, not with words, but with work. Ella's drawings are on my wall. I look at them every night before bed. I still remember what you told me when I was 10, kindness is never wasted, even when it feels invisible. I'm finally learning what you meant. Love, Melissa. The page trembled in my hands, and before I could stop myself, tears fell onto the ink, blurring her name. She wrote. Hank asked quietly. I nodded. "She's trying." He smiled. "That's a start." Later that week, I took Ella to the lake near Cedar Falls, the same lake where Richard and I used to picnic when life was still gentle. The water was calm, dotted with small boats and laughter echoing from the far shore. Ella ran ahead, her laughter cutting through the breeze like a song. She was 10 now, old enough to ask questions I couldn't dodge anymore. "Grandma," she said, crouching by the water's edge, "Mom says she's sorry. Does that mean you forgive her?" The sunlight shimmered on the surface of the lake. I watched our reflections ripple together, hers bright and curious, mine lined and tired, but softer than it used to be. "I think forgiveness isn't something you decide once," I said finally. "It's something you practice every day. Some days you manage it, some days you can't. But you keep trying. Do you still love her?" I smiled. "Always. Love isn't erased by mistakes, it just learns to live differently." She nodded, satisfied with that answer, then ran off again, her hair glowing in the afternoon light. I sat on the old bench overlooking the water. It was the same bench Richard and I had carved our initials into 40 years ago. The letters were faint now, but still they're proof that some things survive if they start with love. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the small locket I'd carried for years. Inside was Richard's photo, worn smooth from my thumb. "You did it, love," I whispered. "You saved us, in your own complicated way." A gentle breeze moved through the trees, and I could almost hear him again, soft, steady. "No, Maggie, you did." That evening, I lit a single candle by the kitchen window and opened my notebook, the one where I'd written everything since this began. I'd filled every page with dates, names, pieces of evidence, but now for the first time, I wrote something different. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's rebuilding what they tried to break. I paused, then kept writing. Forgiveness doesn't mean letting them back in. It means letting yourself move on. And peace doesn't come from money or justice or winning. It comes from knowing the truth and no longer needing to prove it. When I closed the notebook, I felt lighter. The ghosts were finally quiet. Hank knocked softly on the doorframe. "You writing again? Just finishing something I said?" He smiled. "Good. Some stories deserve an ending." I nodded, and some deserve to be told. He poured 2 cups of tea, handing one to me. "So what'll you do now, Mrs.?" "Caldwell." I looked out the window where the candlelight flickered against the fading dusk. "Live. Maybe plant a garden. Maybe teach Ella to bake. Maybe just sit here and watch the world spin without feeling like I have to chase it. He raised his cup. To peace. I raised mine. To new beginnings. We clinked glasses softly, the sound echoing in the quiet room. Weeks later, I sent one final letter to Melissa. Dear Melissa, I got your note. Thank you for trying. I don't know if we'll ever be what we once were, but maybe that's not the goal. Maybe we're just meant to understand each other a little better before it's too late. I forgive you. Not because it erases what you did, but because I need to be free from it. Love always, Mom. I didn't expect a reply. Forgiveness, I'd learned, is a one-way road you walk alone. But a month later, I found a small package at my door. Inside was a framed photo, Melissa, Ella, and me at my retirement party, before the whisper, before the betrayal. Beneath it, a note, "Thank you for giving me a second chance to become the daughter you raised." I smiled, tears filling my eyes. Then I placed the photo on the mantel beside Richard's. For the first time, the house felt whole again. And as the evening sun spilled through the window, warm and forgiving, I whispered to him, to her, to the girl I once was, "I'm finally home."